I've been cleaning up the shop. It's gotten to the point where it's hard to work out here because there's just so much junk everywhere. So it just really needs to get organized. So in doing this, I've done a couple of little projects in the shop that I thought would be nice to make a video out of. The first thing was that I put new wheels on the work cart. The thing that got this started was that I wanted to put the pantorouter on the lower shelf of the cart, and it didn't quite fit because the shelf is too high. So I figured since I was going to be working on the cart, I would take the wheels off and put new wheels on, as the old wheels always felt a little flimsy, and I didn't want to put something heavy on it and have the cart collapse on me. So I tried lifting the work table up, and I took the wheels off that way. But then it seemed like it was going to be easier to put the new wheels on by flipping the cart over. And I could just work directly down onto the end of the leg. And the new wheels look like they'd work. Now, one of the properties of the cart is that it's at the height of the table saw and most of the work surfaces in the shop. And the old wheels were a certain height and the new wheels were a little bit shorter. So to keep that height, I discovered I could use a piece of plywood as sort of a shim between the new wheel and the leg of the cart to maintain the height of the work surface. And what this would do is give me more heft at the bottom of the leg so that the wheel would have more to screw into. So I screwed the new piece of plywood onto the end of the legs. And I marked the holes for the new wheels and drilled holes for those screws. And then it was just a matter of putting those screws in. And then reflipping the cart over again, which was a little bit tricky because it's a big, odd shape, so it's sort of hard to get a grip on it. It's not real heavy, it's just big and awkward. So I found if I lifted it a little bit and put a shim under the edge that I had to grab, that would give me space for my fingers to get under there, and I could lift the cart up and over. Now I can get to lowering the lower table. My fear was that I had used both nails and screws to attach it, and that it wouldn't move when I took the screws out. But it did, so that was good. I just moved it all the way down to the wheels, and it feels much more sturdy now. The reason for this whole project was to put the pantorouter on the lower shelf, which fits perfectly now. So that's really nice. There's the cart. Next thing that I wanted to do, I had never liked the leveling feet on the front of the grinder stand that I made last fall. So my thought was to take a piece of angle iron and screw it to the front of the base of the grinder stand, sort of as a foot. This felt more in keeping with the design language of the stand. So I cut a piece of angle to the width of the grinder stand, then drilled some holes in it for screws to hold it to the base of the grinder stand. This drill press I have set up to run really slow, so it's good for cutting metal. And I think it's still probably just a hair fast for steel, but it seems to work if you put a lot of cutting fluid on there to keep it cool. And once I had the holes drilled, I could make a countersink for the screw head, so it would sit flush with the steel. I had thought I could just take the screws out of the leveling feet and they would come off, so I put shims under the grinder base to sort of hold it up. I had forgotten that the leveling feet were sort of pounded in from below, so I had to tap them off. But the little shims held the base at the right height for the new steel foot that would go across the front, which made it sort of easy. I could just put it on the floor and then just screw it in place. And there it is. It looks a lot better than it did with the leveling feet on the front. And there's still 2 leveling feet in the back and then the piece of angle on the front. So it makes a tripod, hopefully. Now the third thing I wanted to show was to talk about the secondary functions for the stair that I made last time. The first thing was that I had seen the stair as sort of a step stool in the shop that I could move around to different places to climb up to higher places in the shop. So it takes a minute to move around, and you need to lock the feet. But once you do that, it's really nice for climbing up onto the different work surfaces because it's just nice and solid, and it's not steep like a ladder, so you can back off of what you're on onto the stair and feel comfortable doing that. So I used it to sort and clean the wood rack, which was desperate for a cleaning. Then the big secondary function for the stair that I had. So the thought with the stair and the sides like this has been to make two tracks that run from the outside onto the stair. And I can have a cart that can run on those, so I can bring something in to be below the crane, and then the crane can lift it down to the floor. So my idea is to do a 2x4 and then 2 strips of plywood on each side to make sort of rails so the wheels don't fall off, and have that run from the outside to the inside. So that's what I'll do. I'm not entirely sure this is really going to work. It seems complicated, but that's what I'm going to take a stab at. And then the top of the stair is 31 inches high. So on 2x4s, I'll cut off 31 inches as a leg. Then the rest of the 2x4 will be the rail for the top of the stair. And the 2x4 and the 2 pieces of plywood are just a little bit wider than the top of the stair, so I joined it off just a little bit. Now I wanted the rail to run from inside to outside. The cart was going to have to go over the end of the rail, so what I wanted to do was cut a ramp into the end of the 2x4. So from the end of where the 4 feet of plywood was going to attach and to the end of the 2x4, I cut that ramp into the 2x4. I cut the plywood strips from a half sheet of 3/4 inch plywood that I had. And then from those, I could cut those in half into 4-foot pieces. That would work for the rails. Then I attached the plywood with screws. Then the 31-inch leg went on the end. And I realized that I probably needed a little brace for the leg. So I cut a scrap piece of 2x4 with an angle, and then that became a brace for the leg, which I just put in with screws. And that actually worked really well. Now the next thing I wanted to do was to make little tabs that would hang down from the sides of the rail over the top of the stair. And I could use these to clamp these rails to the stair so that they wouldn't slide around and wouldn't fall off with the cart on there. So I screwed those in place. The leftover wedge from the 2x4s I screwed on the end of the rail just as a stop so the cart won't come off the end of the rail. And there's the 2 rails on the stair. Now I've got a cart, but it's a little too narrow in one direction and a little too long in the other direction. So I'm gonna have to take it apart and resize it and then put it back together again.
These wheels don't move. Oh. What's the 6 times 2?
6 inches in diameter and 2 inches wide. I'm guessing that's what that is. It's always funny taking apart your own work because you see the good things that you did and the not so good things that you did. Like why did I make the holes for these bolts so tight to the bolts that I had to pound them out? So I cut the longer section a little shorter so it would be the width of the stair. I did a quick joint on all the pieces just so that they'd be nice and flat when they went back together again. I made it square. One of the good things I think that I did on here is I screwed the 4 pieces together first and then drilled the holes for the bolts for the wheels so that they would line up in the full piece. So I drilled new holes. I made sort of a little bigger diameter flat space for the bolt heads to recess into the wood a little bit. One, so they wouldn't stick up over the surface of the cart, but also these bolts needed that little bit of extra length to get up to the wheel plate. You can see that the bolt head sort of gets sucked into that little hole. I put the bolts on. And the cart's ready. And it works. So this is how the crane works. So if I have something that I want to bring in or out of the shop, I can lift it on the crane, put the rails in place, clamp them in place, bring the cart under, and then wheel the thing, whatever it is, out or into the shop. Thanks for watching.